The situation is escalating faster than most people realize. This is no longer a polite disagreement wrapped in diplomatic language. What we are witnessing now looks and feels like an open declaration of war between a single individual and one of the most powerful political structures on Earth. Elon Musk has effectively pulled the emergency brake on the European Union, and the shockwaves are rippling through every corridor of power in Brussels. In one decisive move, Musk blocked the European Commission's official advertising account on X, not restricted, not limited, blocked, cut off. For an institution that relies heavily on narrative control and paid amplification, this was not a technical inconvenience. It was a direct strike at the heart of its influence. Observers inside and outside Europe were stunned. The European Commission didn't just lose access to an ad account. It lost its primary financial and messaging pipeline on one of the world's most influential platforms. For years, Brussels had used paid promotion to shape conversations, steer public perception, and reinforce its authority. And in a single moment, that lifeline vanished. But that wasn't even the most explosive part. Immediately after the block, Musk went public. In full view of hundreds of millions of users, he typed a sentence so blunt, so unfiltered, that it instantly ignited a political firestorm. Let's sack the EU. There was no joke, no wink, no sarcasm, no ambiguity. It was cold, direct, and unmistakable. A sentence aimed not at a policy, not at a regulation, but at the very existence of the European Union as it currently functions. And that's when Brussels lost its composure. What followed has been described by analysts as a political, institutional, and economic tornado. The response from the European Commission wasn't measured or calm. It was frantic. A massive bureaucratic machine, long accustomed to being untouchable, suddenly found itself facing an opponent it could not intimidate. Silence or control. This is an institution that has spent decades issuing directives, imposing fines, and shaping laws without serious resistance. Now, for the first time, someone with real power was openly defying them on their own battlefield. And here's why this moment matters so much. The entire chain of events began with something almost absurdly simple. The European Commission posted an official advertisement on X. On the surface, it appeared harmless, a video promotion. But according to critics and independent analysts, the ad was deceptive. Users who clicked it were quietly redirected to an official EU website without clear disclosure. In other words, it wasn't just an ad. It was a funnel. That alone might have sparked debate. But the irony is where things turn explosive. Sources claim that the European Commission previously used similar accusations, misleading links, deceptive redirection, manipulation of reach to justify massive fines against Musk and his platform. The very behavior they condemned was now being used by them. Hypocrisy doesn't even begin to cover it. From Musk's perspective, the line was crossed, the rules were violated, and his response was brutally simple. The ad account was shut down. No hearings, no negotiations, no bureaucratic fog, just a final decision. And that decision sent Brussels into full-blown panic. Reports from inside the EU power structure describe a dramatic shift in tone. The usual air of superiority evaporated overnight. In its place, urgency, anger, and fear. Because this time, the threat wasn't theoretical. It wasn't symbolic. It was real, immediate, and public. For the first time, the European Commission was experiencing what it feels like to be challenged in the open, and then something even more dangerous happened. Others sensed weakness. Political figures who had long criticized the EU behind closed doors suddenly stepped forward. The most explosive intervention came from Geert Wilders, fresh off a landslide victory in the Netherlands. He didn't soften his words. He didn't hedge. He went straight for the core of the issue. On X, Wilders wrote that the European Commission is unelected, authoritarian, and fundamentally hostile to freedom of opinion. He called it a totalitarian structure that hides behind democratic language while operating without democratic consent. That message hit like a hammer, because it forced millions of Europeans to confront an uncomfortable truth. No one votes directly for the European Commission. Its leadership is assembled through internal negotiations, political bargaining, and closed-door agreements. Yet this unelected body routinely overrides national governments, imposes regulations, and dictates policy across sovereign states. And it does all of this while claiming moral authority. The question Wilders raised and that Musk has now amplified is simple but devastating. Who gave them this power? Pro-EU elites immediately went into damage control mode. Their narrative, carefully constructed over years, started cracking. So they reached for their oldest weapon, fear. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. Critics of the EU were no longer just critics. They were labeled dangerous, extremist, pro-Russian, Part of some shadowy alliance between foreign actors, tech billionaires, and nationalist politicians, the implication was clear. Oppose Brussels, and you are the enemy. But here's the problem with that logic. Europe is not the European Union. They are not the same thing. Criticizing an unelected bureaucracy does not equal attacking European values, culture, or people. And Elon Musk has never said he wants to destroy Europe. What he is targeting is the Brussels machine itself, a system that has grown so powerful, so insulated, that it now believes it exists above the citizens it was meant to serve. The most chilling example of this mindset comes straight from the top. In a widely circulated speech, Ursula von der Leyen described disinformation as a virus something society must be immunized against. Think about that framing. If information is a virus, then who decides what is healthy? Who defines what is dangerous? The answer, according to EU policy, is the European Commission itself. That's not moderation. That's preemptive control. It's the idea that authorities must act before people even speak, before ideas spread, before debate happens. It's pre-bunking, predictive censorship, thought policing dressed up as public safety. And here's the terrifying contradiction. The same institution that wants to define truth for everyone is now accused of running misleading, deceptive advertising campaigns. That's not an accident. That's power revealing itself. Observers warn that whoever controls information today will control human thinking tomorrow. And that's why Musk's move has resonated so deeply. He didn't respond with violence. He didn't mobilize ideology. He enforced rules publicly, transparently, and without apology. To free speech advocates, X now represents one of the last major platforms resisting full absorption into state-aligned narratives. And that is exactly why it has become such a target. This conflict is far from over. As this confrontation intensifies, the European Union has made one thing unmistakably clear. It will not back down quietly. Realizing that Elon Musk cannot be pressured through public shaming or elite consensus, Brussels has reached for its most reliable weapon lawfare. The machinery of regulation has been fully mobilized, and the target is no longer just a platform. It is the principle behind it. Under the EU's digital laws, X now faces the threat of massive fines. Figures as high as 120 million euros have been floated for allegedly failing to remove what Brussels defines as illegal content. On paper, this sounds reasonable. In practice, it raises a far more dangerous question. What exactly is illegal? Because under the current framework, illegal is not a fixed category. It is fluid, it is political. Today, it may be migration debates. Tomorrow, it may be dissenting opinions about EU governance. The definition shifts depending on who is speaking and who feels threatened. That is the core of Musk's argument. When rules become elastic, power becomes absolute. And Musk's response to this legal escalation was not cautious or diplomatic. It was nuclear in tone. He doubled down on his position, openly questioning whether the European Union, as it exists today, should continue at all. To many, this sounded extreme. To others, it felt overdue. Across Europe, a growing number of citizens believe the EU has drifted far from its original promise of cooperation and prosperity. Instead, they see a centralized bureaucracy obsessed with control, compliance, and narrative enforcement, often at the expense of national sovereignty and democratic accountability. And this time, the backlash isn't limited to Europe. Even across the Atlantic, cracks are forming. The once solid transatlantic alliance is visibly weakening. Political figures in the United States, particularly those aligned with Donald Trump, are increasingly hostile toward Brussels' regulatory overreach. The message from Washington is shifting from cooperation to skepticism. European officials, sensing the ground move beneath them, have responded not with reflection but with ridicule. Figures like Radoslaw Sikorski have resorted to insults, telling Musk to go to Mars, as if mockery could somehow restore lost legitimacy. But insults don't stop ideas, and the public is paying attention. For years, many Europeans felt something was wrong but couldn't quite articulate it. Now, the conflict between Musk and the EU has given shape to that unease. People are asking questions they were never encouraged to ask before. Who decides the rules? Who enforces them? And most importantly, who benefits? Because legitimacy does not come from regulations. It comes from consent. Musk's supporters argue that this is not about one platform or one billionaire. It is about whether citizens are allowed to speak freely without unelected authorities acting as arbiters of truth. Musk is not using force. He is not calling for chaos. He is using transparency, exposure, and resistance within the system itself. And that is precisely why this moment is so dangerous for the establishment. A free platform, one that cannot be fully controlled, represents an existential threat to centralized power. If narratives can be challenged, if authority can be questioned, if dissent can spread organically, then the illusion of consensus collapses. That is why X has become a battlefield. Brussels understands this, and it is why the pressure will intensify. Legal threats, financial penalties, political isolation. Everything short of outright bans is now on the table, but the genie is out of the bottle. The debate has shifted from what did Musk do to who controls your voice, and that question does not have a comfortable answer for those in power. Because once people realize that their opinions can be labeled illegal, their thoughts pre-classified as dangerous, and their speech preemptively suppressed in the name of safety, the spell breaks. This is no longer about Europe versus America, or left versus right. It is about centralized authority versus individual autonomy. And the outcome will shape the future of democratic societies. So now, the responsibility shifts to you. What do you think about this escalating confrontation? Do you believe unelected institutions should define truth and regulate speech? Or should platforms remain open arenas where ideas compete freely? Go to the comments and tell us where you stand. Your voice matters, especially now. Hinweis. This video presents analysis, commentary, and interpretations of publicly reported events and statements for informational and discussion purposes only. Some claims, characterizations, or interpretations may evolve as new information becomes available. Viewers are encouraged to verify facts through multiple reliable sources and form their own independent conclusions. This content is intended to comply with YouTube's policies on misinformation, accuracy, and community standards, and does not promote hatred, violence, or unlawful activity.